Hi, I'm Gail Minogue and I'm happy to see you today. I wanted to speak to you today about the importance of the life path of a country, because our life paths in a country, each one is very different, and it's predicated on your date of birth of that country. Like in America, it's July 4th, 1776. In, say, Canada, it is July 1st. I think it was 1867. And so on and on. Mexico, it's September the 16th, 1810, I believe it is. Anyway, point is, each country has a particular date of birth, which then predicates how that country is going to behave, how it's going to respond, what kind of life path it will have, etc., etc. So the United States has a 5 life path, or 5 characteristic. Canada has a 3, and Mexico has an 8. And the reason I mention these 3 is because they're all tied together with borders, and they all have been colonized. Each one was originally a colony of another place. Both Canada and US were colonies of Great Britain, and of course Mexico was of Spain. So each country has this. That's why you see all these countries operating in either weird ways. Why? We can't understand, but you will understand if you know their life path and your date of birth. And so today, we're seeing in the news right now major protests going on in Canada. And it's by truckers, and they have blocked movement in the capital of the country, which is Ottawa. And it's making all the press because Canada doesn't have these kind of major protests and shutdowns. They may have marches, but they don't have anything that shuts down a city. And they don't have a federal system there in Canada like we do in the United States. So you can't just call in the National Guard, or the military. You could, but they don't really want to do that. Anyway, so each country will handle it something very different. Canada has a 3 life path. What is a 3 life path? And you and I have a life path as well. In fact, it gives me a point to just mention my book, Divine Design, will help you to find your own life path, your own destiny, karmic situations, everything. And the same with figuring out, say, Canada by its name, what type of destiny it has. It's the same thing, same idea for you. So you want to be aware always when you're working with a person, when you're working with a country, what is the characteristics? Why does it behave a certain way? Canada will always be the nice, pleasant place. It has a 3 life path. It's joyful, it's pleasant, it knows the right things to say. It is, your personal, it's the event planner who makes everybody feel comfortable. And so we look at the number 3 as joy. So Canada has that nice uplifting feeling of 3, and we don't expect the place to have these protests and shutdowns of which were going on. I think these truckers, there's hundreds of them, are now going to the airport to try to shut that down, and it's shut down the transportation and supply chain of auto parts to the United States, which is now affecting the US. And the reason it comes as such a shock is because it's a 3 country. It doesn't do this kind of thing. It really doesn't know how to handle it. But the protests are really not about vaccine. The cover is, we don't want vaccine. But the truckers, I think 90 or 90%, 5% of them are vaccinated. And so that's the original pretense of let's shut everything down because we don't want these mandates. But they're already vaccinated. So what is going on? And it basically is fringe groups. And they're coming in from Canada, but they're also bringing in now monies and such from the United States to protest there. So it's like the United States idea of these protests has spread. And because you're seeing Nazi flags in Canada and Ottawa, and you're seeing Confederate flags in Canada, and you see the American protest influence in Canada. But it's so surreal because it is a 3 country. It's always going to be the place you want to go to feel comfortable, peaceful, and accepted, all of that. Now, all 3 countries go through the stage, just like every country does, from barbarian to civilized to decadent. So you can look at a country in the world where it went from barbaric to civilized to decadent. You see more decadence coming out of Europe, shall we say, where it became more, it's gone through all the wars and wars and wars, and it became more civilized. And then it became more decadent. It doesn't really want to do wars. It doesn't, it'll send in some support, but it doesn't want to fight with its neighbors anymore. It's done with that. So it's now more civilized, and so it's leaning on civilized to decadent. When you look at the United States, when you look at Canada, and you look at Mexico, you see the big difference of countries that are trying to go from barbarian to civilized. They're not yet decadent at all. They haven't even gone to that phase. They're still trying to get civilized. So what you're seeing, and of the 3 countries, the most civilized is Canada. That's the most civilized. So for these protests to come from, say, a country like the United States that is going to go from barbarian to civilized, which is still trying to go back and forth, has spread it off to Canada. It's not going to work very well in Canada. It's not going to stay very long in Canada because the people don't want it. That's not the people's way at all. They don't look at it that way. And, we're having this heat wave in LA today. It's like going to be 85 degrees in February. It's crazy. So the long and short is the protests in Canada is really a mark of a protest coming from the U.S. and what it started. So go to the U.S. The U.S. is a 5 life path. The U.S. has a 5 country. It's an agent of change. Whatever it does changes the world. Has to. It's its job. So right now it's in a very destructive change as it tries to destroy systems that have been in place for years since the beginning of the revolution, and to build new systems, to transform it. So it's going through a death and transformation phase, which is really ugly, and it's very much bringing back some of the old barbaric characteristics: crude, loud, rude, brutal, lying, all this kind of exaggeration. So the importance is going to have is that those who are complicit are the silent majority. They have to start being active. So this is going to force those who are silent majority into activity. So we have a couple more years of unpleasantness, is what I would call it, going forward, 22, 23, 24. And after that election in 24, 25, 26, because the aftermath of that election. The entire 20s are tumultuous. But right now, things will start to improve a bit in 24 and then gradually come around to a different point of perspective. And the focus is less on what the government does, less on what the corporations do, and more on what the people need. But that won't start till late 24, 25, 26. So right now we're still in this protest and screaming, hollering, and just really have bad behavior. So it shows you that America still is part of trying to go from barbaric to civilized and developing as a nation. And since it's a 5 country, it's very changeable. It changes all the time. 5 is the middle number. If you have a 5 life path, you're an agent of change. You will make very constructive change, and you will make very destructive changes until you learn the effects of the changes you made so you don't keep doing them. And the other country I want to take a look at is Mexico. Since these 3 are connected, Mexico has an 8 life path. It's totally different. 8 is the number of power, money, control, authority. So you see more of that kind of focus. You see much more of a patriarchal or militant, a drug, very much an internal battle going on with these different factions, subversive with the police, and just a country that really is still really more barbarian than it's trying very hard to go into the civilized aspect. But it's born on a 16-day. Well, that's a karmic debt number. So as long as it's a country, it has to keep working on that debt of the number 16 because it's born 9/16, the day and the month, 1810. So it sealed its fate by picking that date. So it's no accident. It has to constantly work on these karmic issues all the time. Drug, death, trafficking, all these kinds of things. A beautiful country, wonderful people. However, it's got such issues with, again, authority and leadership, because that's the big 8. There's a lot of I want power energy in Mexico. I want power. I'll do anything for power. And you see it a lot in the cartels. You see it in a lot of this, the government in really controlling the army or in bed with the army. And you see the lack of rights for the people. And so, again, Mexico has a lot of work. So it's working from that barbarian phase. It's fascinating when you start to look at countries and you start to understand why they behave the way they do it. And that's just from their date of birth. I didn't even take their name because when we're looking at a destiny or a karmic stuff, we look at the name. But a karmic debt, there's only a few karmic debt numbers, 13, 14, 16, and 19. And it indicates in that life or that lifetime of that country, it's always going to be working on that karmic debt. And Canada got the number 16. So if you want to know more about that, again, here's the book, Divine Design. You can read more about that. But you also want to learn more in case you have one of these karmic debt numbers or you're born on a karmic debt day. It has indications to never, ever move into a karmic debt house or apartment. You don't want 16, you don't want 13, you don't want 14, and you don't want 19. If you look at events in history, many of them fell on a 19 day, shot heard around the world. But here's abuse of power, 19 day for Bill Clinton. Waco, Texas, 19. You just see it, the pattern over and over because it's always the abuse of power in the number 19 karmic debt. So people who are born on that day have to have, there's issues about power. They may feel they want to be powerful, they want to rule it over, but it backfires on them. And so without going into remedies for each one of these, but it just gives you a background of how a country is set by its date that it incorporates or the date it's born, whatever, it, just like the America. So I thought you might find that interesting, helps you to understand why these countries behave. Remember, America, the catalyst of change for the world, supposed to learn to assimilate people, all different nationalities. It's having a real struggle doing that because there's people who don't want to progress. And the country, in order to progress, has to follow its life path, so it has to learn to assimilate. So that's kind of it in a nutshell with these 3 countries and these 3 life paths. But now you know why Canada, we always like to go to Canada. We all love Canadians because they're so pleasant, they're so nice, they're so number 3. And America, you never know. You never know what they're going to do. You never know how they behave. They're always changing. And they're always reinventing the past. That's the way they behave because there are 5. So I hope this gives you a little more insight. It's always a pleasure talking with you, and I thank you so much for tuning in. And we'll see you the next time. Thank you.